Alrighty, welcome everybody to this episode of Moving Forward with Cameron County. And tonight we've got a special guest. His name is J.V. Garcia. He's running for Cameron County Commissioner, Precinct 4. J.V., welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Salinas. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share my platform with people of Precinct 4 and for people in all of Cameron County and the Rio Grande Valley, for that matter.
Well, we welcome you to the show. And could you give us a little bit, some information, some background with regards to yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, what you've done the last couple of years, and what made you decide to run?
Yes, thank you. So I am 40 years old. I can't say I'm in my 30s anymore, although it was some good times. So I am married with two lovely daughters and my lovely wife, who is my backbone for everything I do. And so I was born and raised in San Benito, Texas. Go Hounds! Bleed purple and gold forever. I went to Texas A&M. I graduated in 2000 from San Benito High School. I went to Texas A&M University in College Station and graduated with from the best civil engineering school in the nation, Texas A&M University, Giga Maggies. Woo! So I am a small business owner of Casa Engineering, Civil and Surveying Associates Incorporated, and here located in Harlingen. I am licensed in the state of Texas to practice civil engineering. And as a firm, I'm licensed in 5 other states, including New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida, and primarily to do forensics work on storm damage, for flooding, for windstorm, and any other basic civil engineering that we do also across the states. I have been doing public service or community service since I can remember, since I was a kid, something that was instilled in me from my parents through church. I went to St. Teresa Catholic Church in San Benito. That's where I grew up. That's where I was born. That's where I learned all my values, from being an altar server to being in the choir at St. Teresa, and continuing my music ministry and sharing my gifts and talents, playing music. Me and my brothers, we also have a band called 512 Madrid. I'm going to throw that out there. Go out and check us out. We sing and songwrite. We write songs. That's kind of our passion and our love, that God gave us that talent, and we enjoy using it.
Yeah. So, what instruments do you play?
I dabble in everything, but I mainly I play guitar, sing, a little bit of bass, a little bit of keys.
Drums, many.
You give me a spoon, I'll play it, man.
Okay. Well, many years ago, I actually started a website. This was before Napster, and the idea was to actually provide a mechanism for independent artists and musicians to actually post their music online and sell it. Like I said, this was before buying music was a thing. And I did that for about a year. Me and a friend of mine went into business. And then Napster appeared, and that was the end of everything. And lo and behold, the rest is history. Everybody buys music electronically. But I will say that we were way ahead of our time back in those days. But
I would like to take this opportunity to make a quick plug, because one of the other things I like to do to give back to the community is to do career days. I've done it my entire professional career. Actually did one this morning in San Perlita High School for the middle school students and elementary, middle school, and high school, encouraging people to think about the civil engineering profession, because we're in need of good civil engineers to get us out of a lot of problems. And I was going to do one for W.B. Green in La Feria, and I of course said yes, this year, and then like a week later they canceled it because of the pandemic or the new wave early on. I think it was early on this year, January, February, and there was kind of like a little scare of a wave. So they said submit a Zoom um video of your career, and I was like, well, that's going to be kind of boring. So I had to think a little outside the box. I said, you know what? I'm going to write a song. And first time I ever made a video. So look up JV Garcia, civil engineer. It was a career day project that I did for everybody to learn about civil engineering. And I geared it towards the La Feria and the Teocano Lake area also. I kind of made some references. It's just,
Yeah.
check it out.
Hey, so let's talk a little bit about civil engineering. I'll be honest with you. The most I know about civil engineering is I see these guys with a little telescope and a tripod outside. But I bet it's
Yes.
more to it than just that. Could you just give us a brief idea of what civil engineering is? And what
Yeah, well,
is.
that's the starting point of civil engineering. Now that's called land surveying. So what they're doing is, and I was just explaining this to the kids today. We had the total station. We have it's on tripods, and it basically measures distances left, right. We call it XYZ. So it gives us a point on an axis, and it communicates. There's also GPS
Uh-huh.
units that communicate with satellites, and basically we're getting elevations of the Earth,
Okay.
and we're getting distances, and I told everybody there, I was like, basically, and I took a measuring tape out. It's basically a fancy measuring tape
Yeah.
to do to measure acreage. And then, so civil engineering, as civil engineers, we need to know, the lengths and the distances of the land that we're working on. But we basically design roads, bridges, water lines, sewer lines, flood mitigation, and environmental aspects, the low impact development, to help reduce flooding, while at the same time filtering water so that way it goes out into our waterways, and we help the wildlife and the species, all the different species of aquatic species that are out there.
Yeah.
So it all ties into just doing good for nature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, what actually made you decide to run? Could you give us a little bit of some background on that?
yeah, that's a really good question. So part of my advocacy and just being involved with the community was, in 2019 we had these what the what NOAA dubbed the uh, Great June Flood 2, because in
Oh yeah.
2018 they called it the Great June Flood Part 1. So we had Part 2 in the La Feria, Santa Rosa, Teocano, Harlingen, Primera, Combs area. We were all, and basically that's a big chunk of Precinct 4. Um, and everybody was affected. So there
Right.
were about 7 town hall meetings. And at the time I was going to get my master's for civil engineering. And lo and behold, on the day of the flood, I needed to come up with my paper, my term paper for that day, and it was on sustainability and resiliency of in civil engineering.
Yeah.
So I decided to write about the Great June Flood Part 2. And so I went to every single flood town hall meeting, and I met a lot of people, and I also heard what the city officials at the time in Harlingen, in Primera, in Combs, uh, and the county in Santa Rosa, the one that they had. I heard what they were telling the people, and I heard how the people were interacting. And let's just say they weren't being completely honest.
Right.
And as a civil engineer, I noticed this, and I said, no, this is something that we need to shed a light on, and we need to address once and for all. Because me, growing up in San Benito, all my life, I've flooded about 5 times. Now my daughters have experienced their first flood.
Right.
And I felt that I would be doing a disservice if I didn't speak up and share my knowledge and my expertise in my profession of civil engineering, um, with my communities here in Cameron County and all of the Rio Grande Valley, to share that knowledge. And then when I began to reach out to the current officials here in Harlingen, well, some of them we've already voted out. Uh, to the officials in Harlingen, to the officials in Cameron County, there is this resistance, or almost ignoring any kind of work. I even offered pro bono work. I've done pro bono work actually for my hometown of city, San Benito. Worked with UTRGV in conjunction with to do a drainage project free of charge. And so I offered my services. Nobody wanted to meet. I offered to do a roundtable of experts. So that way, say, ask us, don't just believe me. I'm just one expert, but let me get you a roundtable of 10 experts. You all can ask, why do we flood? How do we fix it? And where do we get this money to solve this problem? That hasn't happened.
Right.
And that's something that I wanted to bring to the table. And I recognized that we were going to get nowhere with the current leadership at the time in 2019. And 2020 went on, and I created an advocacy group in Harlingen called Reinvent Harlingen Drainage. And we organized. And we got to the point where we realized that we're going to have to get involved with our city government and be the change that we want to see. Commissioner Rini Perez here in Harlingen is now one of the leading voices, if not the leading voice in the city of Harlingen. Flipped the majority in Harlingen, and now the citizens have seen changes in drainage policy because I've been appointed to planning and zoning, and we just recently updated an entire drainage policy, just in the short 5 months that I've been in office here in planning and zoning. So I guess my point of this is that elections have consequences, and we are going to be involved from now on. We will not sit any more elections out because it's too important. And the reason why we're flooding essentially has to do with our governmental leaders, period. So that's the main reason why I decided to run, because I actually tried reaching out to my opponent several times. When he finally decided to sit with me, it was just all right, now get out of here, and we're not going to follow up on anything. So I gave him a lot of information. We had discussions, and it was like, okay, give us free service, give us some pro bono service, and we'll go with this. Like, it doesn't work that way. Put an excavator out in Teocano on that ditch that needs to be get some palm trees and some trees removed, and then I'll give you some free calculations. But you also have to give me some data so I can work on these calculations. You can't just pull calculations out of thin air. You know, you need data and a lot of inside information. So,
well, it definitely seems to indicate that you've got a passion for infrastructure. I mean,
yes,
I know here at the county, I hear what you're talking about. I live here in Brownsville, and we've experienced quite a bit of some of the things that you're talking about. Maybe not to the extent that the areas like in Precinct 4 did, because I will tell you that I used to commute to McAllen during that first flood, and it was kind of scary driving to McAllen and watching some of those areas. I mean, look like lakes, you know. So there definitely is. Go ahead.
There were those pictures with Shamu, you know, in the streets, and you know. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. That's not a problem. So let's talk a little bit about infrastructure and the cost of infrastructure. How much is that a city issue versus a county issue versus a state issue? And I'm talking about this because here in Brownsville we have Boca Chica Boulevard that is a state highway, and I kid you not, there's been, I guess, ever since I was in high school, and I'm slightly older than you are, just by a little bit, but I can remember back in those days, it flooded then. And God knows how many times they've redone the street, you know, reconstructed it over and over, and it just continues to flood. So, you know, when the city gets called to task over it, they say, well, it's not a city problem, it's a state problem because the Boca Chica Boulevard all the way to Starbase is a state highway. So how much of that is the city's responsibility versus the county's responsibility versus the state responsibility?
It's all of our responsibilities. Anyone who is in public office, anyone who is a public servant should work with interlocal agencies, from the cities to the counties to the irrigation districts, the drainage districts, to the state and international level, international boundary water control. I've always said from the very beginning, this problem not one city or not one entity can solve this problem of this, what I call a flood crisis. I like to remind people, before we had the pandemic, before we had the COVID crisis, we had a flood crisis.
Yeah.
And what we need in a Cameron County leader is somebody who can anticipate that there's going to be another crisis. What's going to be next? A plague of locusts? You know,
Yeah.
like what with a biblical proportion. So we've got to be prepared, and you've got to be able to juggle multiple crises at once, multiple jobs at once, and that's something that I can bring to the table is multitasking. As I've always said, this flood crisis is a multi-city, multi-county, regional, state, and when I say state, meaning Texas Department of Transportation, right? Texas Parks and Wildlife, and international problem. And when I say international, I mean the International Boundary Water Commission, which is responsible for managing the waters in the Rio Grande, the Arroyo, Colorado, and the floodway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a solution. It's a problem that needs regional solutions. Now, can every city do something to mitigate? Yes, but you're not going to be able to solve it. So what I'm trying to do is lead by example in the city of Harlingen by updating our drainage ordinance, what I call the low-hanging fruit, that every city in the Rio Grande should adopt as a bare bone minimum drainage requirement. There are some cities that don't have any drainage requirements, meaning a developer can go develop 20 acres of agricultural land, they grew sorghum on it or whatever crop they were growing, and build homes and do zero for detention requirements, meaning, you're going to generate this tenfold amount of stormwater that wasn't going into the ditch system before this new 100-lot subdivision goes up. Now, what are you going to do with all this extra water you just generated? Well, nothing. You're just going to flood everybody. Mm-hmm. So there are some cities that don't have any. There are some cities that have it very low. And there are some cities that have set a standard that is a good standard, such as McAllen, Mission, Hidalgo County, and now I'm proud to say the city of Harlingen, because I led those efforts in those short 5 months that I was there to update, to meet from a 25-year storm detention requirement to a 50-year storm detention requirement. Now, McAllen is currently looking to address and even increase their standards by doing thinking outside the box type of thing, like underground storage, in our Walmart parking lots. Think about these Walmart and mall parking lots, these, the convention center parking lots, where it's just parking. Well, we need a retrofit. We should have done it the first time, but we can retrofit every single one of those with underground storage. Think about all that water going underground, getting filtered, slowing that water down before it goes into our curb and gutter and to our ditches. Now think about every single household being required, just like we're required to have water services, clean water, being able to flush our toilet and it actually goes somewhere and not stay in our yards, right? Basically not creating a colonia. The 1994 subdivision rules in county were adopted to avoid colonias. But now imagine if every house was required to, before you purchase a home, to have a rain harvesting system, not just a little 50-gallon barrel tank, but like a 2,000, 3,000 gallon underground tank or cistern where all the water from your roof was captured and then it was recycled for irrigation purposes. I think that's where God is kind of throwing us as we have this flood drought season, Mm-hmm. Here's all this water in one shot and then a drought season. God gave us brains to figure out this problem. And in 50 years from now, I'm telling people that's going to be the norm. They do it in the hill country in Texas,
Yeah.
And they filter the water and they recycle it because you can't pump water up all the way up on the hills. So you capture it.
Well, I think some places in Mexico, they do the same thing, don't they?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's where I'm trying to advance that from a STEM perspective. All our school districts are trying to promote STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But then it just stops there. Let's actually utilize that in our city government and civics and bring that and engage the school districts and all the, let's have competitions. Let's have the good old-fashioned science fairs. Help County Commissioner J.B. Garcia solve this flood problem. Let's have a science fair project, my first year to what is the problem? What is your solution? And let's do something real where we can get national attention to bring those funds that we need, because God knows we don't have enough tax money to solve the problems. We have 43 cents tax per $100 valuation. Um, for That's just not enough taxes for us to do all the projects we need to do. So we need to figure out a way to supplement that with grants. And the reason why I'm bringing this is because I have a little bit of experience. I used to work at Brownsville PUB for about 6 years.
Okay.
And so in 2009, President Obama signed the stimulus package called the American Reinvestment Act, the ARA project, Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And because we had a good team, we were our own grant writers. They got engineering, they got accounting. We all worked together as a team, and we wrote the estimates. We got together with other engineers and did plans, and we applied for this amazing amount of money, 100% grant, and it was for sanitary sewer overflows for our sanitary sewer wastewater infrastructure. And because we had a good team and we were prepared, we were ranked #1 in the state of Texas, and we received $47 million for Brownsville PUB. And it's on Brownsville PUB's website. You can go check it right now. And I was part of that team. I have an award on my wall. I'm very proud of that team. And we split up that $47 million into 13 projects. I don't know if you remember that time. It was 3 years of a lot of construction going on, replacing sanitary sewer pipe, miles and miles of sanitary sewer pipe and force main and lift stations. Plus, we had to rip up the road, so then we were doing new roads and fixing the drainage, fixing the drainage back to what it was at the time. So I understand grants, projects, and how much money it takes. So fast forward to the missed opportunity that we had in 2019, 2020 with Texas Water Development Board, the same entity that gave that Reinvestment Act. It had to go through the State Revolving Fund, which was the Texas Water Development Board. And we had an opportunity collectively, every single political subdivision, meaning every city, every county, every drainage district, every irrigation district, and every school district, to apply for up to $18 million. How many different entities, how many cities do we have in Cameron County? How many drainage districts? How many irrigation districts? Over 50.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, school districts. So you're talking about close to $1 billion that was designated for flood-ravaged communities. It was called the Flood Infrastructure Fund, FIF. And I was working with the leader of this fund up in Austin, just as a private citizen, trying to see, what do I need to do? She's like, you need to engage. You need to have workshops. You need to get involved. We've already sent it to everybody in the state, and we can't personally call anybody. But Mr. Garcia, we need people like you to go and explain to the city officials and the county officials that this money exists. So I did. The problem is no one believed me. Mm. So I was over here trying to have these workshops, and I have one on record at we held it at Chamber of Commerce. We tried to have a centralized location. Mayor of Combs showed up, some city commissioners from San Benito, the Texas Water Development Board was there, Drainage District, I think one of David Garza commissioners staff was there, and heard it from the horse's mouth that this was a first come, first serve flood infrastructure project, eligible for up to $18 million every single political subdivision. And this was with 10 months left for the bridge application to be due. The thing is, everybody dragged their feet. Wow. And they submitted within 2 months left. So they waited to the last moment, and the city of Harlingen got a $6 million grant, and they're over here patting themselves on the shoulder, but it was for another study. We have dozens of studies that we've done. Enough with the studies. We already know what the problem is. We haven't implemented any of the work from any of the studies. But here we are doing another 5-year study for the city of Harlingen, Combs, and Primera. They had just finished a major study of the drainage district for Harlingen, Combs, and Primera. And here we are wasting $6 million for another study instead of putting that money into. My point is, we only got $6 million for for this region. I think the county got another 2 or 3 million, and everybody's patting themselves. My criticism to that is we could have gotten, if we had the right leadership and the right communication, we could have gotten $1 billion.
Wow.
And that's the type of opportunity that we will never miss out on ever again if I'm the county commissioner for Precinct 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, that's pretty interesting. I mean, we obviously did not know that those were missed opportunities. Um, so, where does the money for some of these upgrades come from? Would that come from a state grant, a federal grant? Does it come from taxes locally? And how does the merging of the MPOs across the valley help or hinder in some of this? Maybe that's not part of drainage and
Uh-huh.
sewerage and stuff like that.
Yes, it
But
is.
I guess where does the money where will the majority of the money come from, or where can it come from?
Okay, so let me go back to the flood infrastructure fund. That money, well, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
That program's done. We need our state reps and senators to give another round of that for flood ravaged communities. Um, that was it was passed in 2019 called the Flood Infrastructure Fund, and it was state funds that were I believe from the rain day fund that were allocated for flood ravaged communities, and it was given through the Texas Water Development Board's state revolving fund. They call it the SRF.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that money was applied for, and that's where you would go and apply for that money. But there are millions of dollars available through the EDAP program, Economically Distressed Area program, through the Army Corps of Engineers, through FEMA, and of course through the state revolving fund through the Texas Water Development Board. But the most important one just got approved, the bipartisan bill, this infrastructure bill from the Biden administration. One of the only things that Republicans and Democrats actually agree on is let's work together on infrastructure. So we're about to get a massive amount of money. They're still working out the details in Congress on how they're going to allocate these funds. But we're going to get our fair share. Everyone's going to get their fair share. But there are certain areas where you have those leaders who are advocating harder than any other leader is. And that's what I want to do. I want to go out. I want to go to the state capitol and testify and make the case for why the Rio Grande Valley, specifically Harlingen, Primera, Combe, Santa Rosa, La Feria, and what I call ground zero of our flood crisis in the Rio Grande Valley, the Teocano Lake community.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we need to focus the funds for flood infrastructure, for all of our infrastructure, and that's where it begins. If we do not begin there, we have our eye off the ball. Mm-hmm. The people of Teocano flood 3 to 4 times a year for the past 5 years. So there are people that don't have sheetrock in their bottom 4 feet of their homes because they say, why would I put sheetrock up if I have to replace it every year? I don't have $10,000 in my budget to replace sheetrock every year.
Would that be covered under FEMA by any chance?
No, because if you get a grant from FEMA for one flood, you can't get it the next year. So there's these rules so that's why there's people in homes and businesses in the La Feria Santa Rosa area that don't have sheetrock on the bottom 4 feet of their homes and businesses. I've seen it.
Wow.
So that's where the funding would come through. Grants, you need aggressive grant writers, but we also need our grant writers to work across city and district and county lines to work together. And that's what I would do as county commissioner. I would have workshops and I would make everything transparent because God knows, what's going on behind closed doors. But as far as the merging of the MPO, we are the 5th largest MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, in the entire state of Texas. That means that we get the 5th largest amount of funds for infrastructure. Primarily, over 90% of this goes to TxDOT work, expanding our highways, doing brand new highways through the middle of Ed Couch or Elsa or through the middle of all of our agricultural fields, right? Well, that is an undoubtedly, if not planned correctly, going to cause additional flooding in areas that don't even flood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I went on record on a Texas Society of Professional Engineers webinar where the planner for the MPO was talking about all the projects that are coming, and I said, please pay attention to the drainage infrastructure because historically we haven't.
Mm-hmm.
TxDOT it has the equal blame than any city or any drainage district in creating flooding problems. People, when they did the expansion of TxDOT, in the La Feria area, you drive through a rain event, you cannot exit the ramps because it's just flooded.
Oh, I know.
They
I've
call them
seen it.
they call it a drainage improvement when you turn an earthen berm, a ditch, right,
Uh-huh.
with grass, into concrete pipe.
Uh-huh.
But in reality, what you're doing is you are getting that water faster. What used to take its sweet time and sing a song on its way to the ditch, right? Because there's a friction factor
Mm-hmm.
on this earth, on this ditch. When you change that into a concrete pipe, now that water is just shooting through that pipe and getting to those ditches faster than they ever got before. It's called time
Mm-hmm.
of concentration. And because now you get that water a lot faster to those ditches, well, now our neighborhoods need a drain.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've created this backup into our neighborhoods. So there's no communication between drainage districts, cities, counties, and TxDOT, right? The multi-city, multi-county,
Right.
multi-district. And then during a flood, all those areas, the city of La Feria is saying, call the drainage district. The drainage district is saying, call the irrigation district. They're saying, call county precinct 4. They're saying, no, you need to call the IBWC. So everybody's playing this blame game. It's too late at that point. And until we actually start to work together instead of blaming each other,
Yeah.
then we will begin to address the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to bring to Cameron County is get
Yeah.
all the right entities at the table to talk about it,
Yeah.
to communicate throughout the year and every year and continue to work on that communication skill to prevent the next flood.
Yeah. And I guess, what I don't understand is the structure of the county commission as it exists. Do 4 or 5 guys just get elected to their precincts and they just take care of their own precinct? Or is there actual real communication between the precinct commissioners as well as the county judge?
Well,
I
there's
just don't know how that works.
well, there's definitely no advocacy on the part of my opponent, who is not truly advocating for the needs of our community. And that's one of the main things that I've heard is that just unanswered calls, unanswered emails, no return calls, no return emails. I mean, just simple phone call communicating goes a long way.
Right.
So every county commissioner is responsible for their own precinct, but has a vote in the entire Cameron County. So I would have a vote on things happening in Padre Island in Precinct 1, in SpaceX, Precinct 2, things happening county-wide. You have a vote for everything happening, but you go and you be the voice for your own precinct and the needs of your precinct.
Okay.
So of course there's compromise. Of course there's compromise. Well, you know what, we precinct 3 or the people over in Four Corners, they call it in on San Jose Ranch Road.
Right.
That's ground zero number 2.
Yeah.
They're always flooding.
Yeah.
Always. I feel so bad. Drive by there during a heavy rain, and these people are underwater.
Wow.
So simultaneously, I would be advocating for people who flood in Precinct 3 as well. But yeah, so we got to work together. And of course, there's debates and where should we prioritize our funds. But that's where you've got to go. That's where I'm going to go and make my argument at Commissioner's Court, put it on the record, listen to the public comments, and vote.
Yeah.
And let the people decide who's advocating for who.
Yeah. And let's kind of change the subject a little bit. Obviously, you've mentioned that as a county commissioner, you're going to be one vote out of 4 or 5 other individuals. And there are a lot of hot topics on the table. One of the very hottest topics right now is the county pursuing this arena. And so I wanted to
Yeah.
kind of get your take on what your position is with regards to that.
Right.
Because it's coming up for a vote here in about 2 weeks,
It is.
and I know that it was on the ballot once and it failed by a slight majority. And I just want to get your take on that project. If you've got some feedback, background information on it, I don't know. Um,
Well, I don't have all the background information like many citizens who are trying to wonder like what's going on here. But I will just so this was also a question that came up in my one and only debate with my opponent this past Sunday. If you haven't seen it,
uh-huh.
so I've also studied your podcast, and I've seen that you're advocating for it. I saw Judge Trevino's interview with you as well, and I saw how hard they're advocating for it. But I'm going to go ahead and go on the record right now with the majority of the people who have already voted this down in November of 2021.
Hmm.
And here's why. Specifically in Precinct 4, the people of Los Indios, El Ranchito, Santa Maria, La Feria, Santa Rosa, Teocano Lake, La Torre area, Primera, Combs, and Harlingen do not think that that is the priority for our area right now.
Hmm.
Um, sure, hotel tax, revenue tax can only be used on tourism attractions. Um, if it can be used on tourism attractions, something that I've been proposing is an ecotourism center in the heart of Teocano Lake, where people come from all over the country and Canada. It's already a designated migratory path for the birds, you know. People come from all over the place. It's a
Hmm.
historical site already. And it's filled to the brim where there are roads on Louisiana Cocoa Road where you go out there right now and you look and water is coming into the street.
Hmm.
The lake has silted up over time, something that used to be maintained. They stopped maintaining it. It's a natural depression in our earth. It's the lowest level in the entire county, elevation wise in the earth. And so water naturally flows there. Well, birds naturally migrate there.
Hmm.
And people who love to watch birds naturally go there. So let's create an ecotourism center with our hotel tax. I think the people of Precinct 4 would much rather vote for an ecotourism center in Teocano to address, to bring sales tax revenue, to revitalize the downtowns of La Feria and Santa Rosa. People can go and revitalize that town. If you drive through there, you can see that they are forgotten and they feel forgotten.
Hmm.
And they flood year round. So the argument that you can't use it on drainage is really a misnomer. It's false because you actually can if you, again, think outside the box.
Right.
If we use it for an ecotourism center at Teocano Lake, inevitably they're going to have to clean out all the silts that have all the clay and silts that have silted up, and there's no more capacity in Teocano Lake. Dredge it, create this new capacity where waters are going to naturally flow to,
Hmm.
and you will begin to address this flood crisis.
Hmm.
That is something that nobody, I've been talking about it, but none of the officials are leaning, other than the people that are going to vote for me, and on March 24th, know that this is something I'm going to continue to advocate for and push. And it's going to be a fight. I know not everybody's going to buy into it. There's
Right.
going to be compromises, but that's where we can better utilize this hotel tax because, again, tourism, people are coming all over the place. We need to use our natural resources, our natural bodies of water, like the beach, right? It's a tourism center. And our Civil War site, when the last battle of the Civil War was fought here in our, here in Brownsville, um, at Palo Alto. I mean, we have historical sites here. We have resacas. We have all of this wonderful, wonderful natural resources where we just need to take care of. People can't go to Houston to see another migratory. I mean, there are certain areas. People
Yeah.
come from all over the place to come here. So let's
Yeah.
take care of that. Let's nurture it. That is our local environment. That is going to help generate that sales tax revenue naturally.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you say to those that, argue that, and you've heard it. I mean, you've lived here in the valley for a long time. Well, we don't have anything here in Cameron County. We always look towards the west, and Hidalgo
Mhm.
County has this and they have that, and whether it's an arena or some other venue of some sort. I mean, what do you
Mhm.
say to that? I mean, the proponents of the arena, you know,
That's super simple.
you know,
That's super. That's so. So what I'm going to say to that is, first of all, the arenas and Dodge Arena, they struggled.
yeah,
They had to get they got State Farm Arena, and it's still hard to fill those venues. Um, the convention centers. We have a convention center in Harlingen that's struggling.
right,
We have
right,
the proposed convention center in San Benito that just got approved. They're going to struggle.
right.
So everybody wants to have
Actually,
their own.
actually, even the McAllen Convention Center has just broken even. And
Right.
that's after 10,
So
12 years.
correct. So my answer to those is to say that we have nothing here in the valley. Guess what? We got SpaceX here in the valley.
Yeah,
Let's sell that, but also let's make sure that SpaceX doesn't flood because if you drive during a rain over there, guess who else is also flooding?
yeah.
SpaceX.
Well, I'm curious about that because, SpaceX has been here for about what, maybe 7 years operating. I mean, yeah, 2014, 2015, they started, doing mounds and things like that, so forth. But we didn't have any, launch towers at the time. But we haven't seen what a major hurricane means for that area. So
Mhm.
I'd be curious to see how that kind of withholds. But let's talk a little bit about SpaceX because that's also another controversial subject. In the valley, we've got a need for jobs, and not just jobs, but jobs that actually pay, a living wage. And there's disagreement of what a living wage is. Obviously, 7.25 an hour is not a living wage. Uh,
No,
the question, and so there's a push nationally as well as locally that everybody should make at minimum $15 an hour. But what I get, and the county judge and I spoke about this a little bit the other night, is that it almost seems when we have companies that come down here and are interested in relocating down here, and they have the capacity to pay $15 or more, somebody is always griping. And it can be the environmentalists, it can be others, and so forth. But is there a balance that we can somehow achieve to, provide and be supporters of these job creators coming down without alienating them, to the point of having, our district attorneys show up and threaten that they're going to put people in jail down there. And I understand why that was done. I understand. I understand what led to that. But there's got to be compromise, and whether it's SpaceX or LNG. I mean, what's your take on all of this? I mean, we need
well,
jobs. You know.
absolutely, absolutely. I think we welcome that. We've got whoever thought we'd be launching rockets,
Absolutely.
from here. So this youth brain drain. That's why I'm saying go out, get your education. People now, when people used to leave, people still want to leave because it floods all the time, and they don't even know it's space that's here. They feel like, oh, I'm going to get out of here. No, 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 come back.
Yeah.
Go get an education. Come back and bring that knowledge here because we need a new generation of leaders. And I will always advocate for new leadership to lead the way, to come up with those new ideas, because that's what makes our societies better
Yeah.
over time. So, yes, no, we definitely need to support job creators. As a small business owner, I 725, I would never even consider that.
Yeah.
I think my lowest, is 12.
Yeah.
So we don't even I don't even go lower than $12 an hour, and that was just on my own,
Yeah.
because that's just how I feel. I think my employees need a decent wage, but of course we need to encourage more development. I am pro development.
Yeah.
We need to build homes. I mean, people are having babies. They need to live somewhere.
Right.
We're growing. So I'm just advocating for smarter development.
Yeah.
So we can not add to this flood problem. We're already on our way to being the next Houston. Houston had this urban sprawl where developers and job creators went in there, and in 20, 30 years, this urban sprawl, this big old boom, and they ignored drainage, which brings me back to the MPO. We're going to have all this interconnectivity of all these highways everywhere. We're going to boom, and we better pay attention to drainage because it's going
Yeah.
to cause more problems. Now, if you take a drive out there during a heavy rain event, you'll see that SpaceX is having drainage issues.
Yeah.
Just because Elon Musk is the richest man in the world doesn't mean he can do whatever he wants to.
Right.
He should follow the rules for the permitting process through the Cameron County permitting process.
Right.
Now we can help expedite it, but why can why was he able to not do any kind of drainage infrastructure, but yet they're giving a hard time to every developer for just getting a simple permit.
Yeah.
So it's not even. You got people, you got developers, you got engineers, you got people that just want to subdivide one lot just to build a home.
Yeah.
It's taking them a year and a half to be able to subdivide their property because there's no streamlined process through the county, and there's a revolving door of engineers and planners through the different cities. And they can trust me, I know this. I deal with this on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I will be advocating for all of the engineering departments in all the different cities in the county to make sure that we don't have that revolving door,
Right.
to make sure that we have the resources, whether it's a pencil and a paper or a total station, like you said, the laser and the telescope,
Yeah.
whatever resource they need to succeed, to streamline this process for subdivisions, for developments, smart development with drainage and flood mitigation in mind, right? So that way we can help our developers and help our sales tax revenue and help our realtors, and help everybody, continue to grow and live and be a society.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Well, that.
but we are a nation of laws and rules and ordinances, and we need to update ordinances that don't work. Get input
Right.
from people who, because there are outdated ordinances from speed humps to drainage to subdivisions to you name it. Talk to
Yeah.
any developer. They'll tell you they're frustrated.
Well, I tell you what, I haven't had much experience with the county level, but I do know with the city of Brownsville. About 2 or 3 years ago, I started a business, and unfortunately, I chose a location that was brand new, and I couldn't even give it a certificate of occupancy.
There you go.
And unfortunately, a lot of that was delays because of the city regulations. A lot of it was the developer that wasn't being very honest with the folks like me that were tenants. I mean, I couldn't even get internet service to the area because Spectrum and AT&T, their trunk line ended like a block away. And so in
Mm-hmm.
order for me to get internet service, which I was dependent on for my business,
Yeah.
I had to pay 7 grand for somebody to run a wire a block away. And
Yeah.
it was horrible. It was horrible.
No.
There appears to be a lot of roadblocks, not just at the city level. I don't know about the county, but there's got to
You're
be a
right.
better way.
You're right. So I'm going to give you an example, just a real life example that the Canos over here in Harlingen. I met with them several times, and they wanted to do a one lot subdivision and build a home, build their family home. They're expecting, and they're excited. And here they are, 2 years into this process, haven't been able to break ground on their home, right? And what's holding them up is this issue with this fire hydrant, that they're going to have to pay $10,000 for a fire hydrant that should have been there. That's city infrastructure. But now they're making the homeowner. So I got to give it to them because they fought this tooth and nail and they never gave up. And that's what I encourage them. That's what I see. The resiliency. Those are the type of people we need. The people that are not going to give up. And kudos to the Canos for that. But to the point where they took it to the planning and zoning board that I'm on, took it to city commission. We updated an entire ordinance for fire hydrants within the ETJ to where if it should be the city's requirement to install that fire hydrant. It should
Yeah.
not be the burden of a homeowner to provide fire protection for their 10 neighbors
Yeah.
when there was a fire hydrant there in the first place.
Right.
So just like little things like that people don't hear about every day, but I do because I see it. I deal with that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, one of the things that appears to me, as we've conversed here for almost an hour, is that you've got some skills that I don't think that others that have maybe served before you or maybe currently served have had. And you seem to be the infrastructure guy. And I think that's something that's of benefit because, like I said, I don't know the backgrounds of some of the others that are currently on the commission. I don't know anybody personally who served before, but you seem to be passionate about infrastructure, and that's a welcoming, refreshing change that I haven't seen before. I mean, there's no doubt that you know your stuff when it comes to drainage and things like that, which is
and
something that
water and
a lot of
and
people
water
don't.
and sewer and roads and bridges.
Well, that's true. I mean, we've got a whole variety of infrastructure projects that would be great to
That's
do.
right. So one of my biggest criticisms, it's so funny because one of my biggest criticisms is that I talk about drainage all the time.
Yeah,
And the reason is because we flood all the time.
yeah,
That is the issue at hand. That is the priority that people are thinking about. Everybody, when you go out and vote, remember the 2019 flood. Remember the 2020 floods in Hurricane Hannah. Remember last year, 2021, when the city of Harlingen was handicapped on October 1st.
yeah,
The city, the 10-year rain event, a small rain event, entire city was shut down.
right,
Sirens all over the place. Hundreds of cars stalled. May 19th of 2021, July 7th, 8th, and 9th. Everybody in Cameron County flooded. October. It doesn't take a great June flood to flood us anymore.
yeah, yeah,
Flooding with this just yesterday. There was areas that flooded
right.
with the rains. So
And
so it's
lights
a real,
flickered. I lost my internet for a couple of seconds.
what's a real problem, and the only reason I'm talking about drainage is because that's the issue at hand.
Yeah,
I'll talk about whatever infrastructure needs are going to be at hand and simultaneous. I'm just talking about that right now because that's the main issue, and that is just the hurdle that we need to get to really address my platform, which is the same platform as any public servant. We
yeah,
want a quality of life, right? How can you have a quality of life if we're constantly flooding every year?
right.
How can you have economic development, right, if it's not done properly and it just exacerbates or adds to the flooding problem,
Right.
right? How can we have mental health for our veterans and when floods are causing and triggering post-traumatic stress, and creating new PTSD and triggering PTSD and for our veterans? So how can we have any of this if we don't address the root of it? How can we fix our potholes in our roads
Yeah,
if the reason for it is the inadequate drainage?
yeah,
So basically, roads have potholes because they're getting undermined. When they get flooded, water seeps in. It's not a pool liner. Water seeps in. Roads are not meant to hold water. So when a
yeah,
road floods, pothole city.
yeah,
So I want to address the root of the problem so we can have resilient and sustainable roads. So we don't waste taxpayer money on just fixing potholes every year.
right, right.
So that's what I get to bring to, and when we get this millions and millions and millions of dollars from the Biden infrastructure package, which are going to have a lot of the same, um, uh, like Buy American requirements,
Right.
things like that, things that were very similar to the ERA program from Obama, right? They served together, so
Right.
it's like a stimulus package.
Right.
Do the people of Precinct 4 want an attorney, my opponent, who practices law? I think we've seen what attorneys bring to the table. Or do you want a civil engineer who knows about infrastructure, who knows how to go and get the grants and how to prioritize the different projects, whether it's drainage, road, bridges, environmental, ecotourism? You all decide what type of leader we want for this next round of elections because it matters. Infrastructure is why we're voting for the civil engineer, which is me, JB Garcia, for Precinct 4 in Cameron County.
All right. Well, let's just talk about one other area. And I don't always ask this question, but you kind of gave me a little bit of background information with regards to faith and how that has been very important to you. And I know that in the last 2 years, for a lot of us, the last 2 years we faced a pandemic that we had not seen in 100 years. I'll be honest with you. I lost two or three relatives with regards to COVID. And I wanted to get your take a little bit about how your faith helped you the last 2 years get through the pandemic. I don't know if you suffered any direct, consequences because of the pandemic. But obviously, it was tough on everybody. It definitely was even tough on our government leaders with regards to information and vaccinations. There was, you know, bumps along the road to get there. But first of all, I'd like to kind of reach out to you and ask you how your faith helped you during the last 2 years with the pandemic, and what do you think we need to do better to prepare for the next time? Because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. COVID was the big thing for 2 years, and who knows what the next one could be.
Well, first of all, thank you. Yes, my condolences to you, your family members, to everybody who lost a loved one, a friend, a family, a neighbor. Yes, I did suffer. I had friends, family, distant family member, and acquaintances that we all lost. I think we all suffered this as a world. This was one of the first times I've ever kind of seen the world kind of going through something all at the same time that everybody could kind of put themselves in somebody else's shoe. And my faith definitely played a big role in when we had to quarantine, and it got me through it. At the same time, my faith was actually tested. So, kind of tested through fire kind of thing for a lot of us. Um, we grew a lot as a community. We saw how a virus can get easily transmitted and how masks actually do work.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely took the leadership of Pope Francis when he proclaimed, he said that wearing your mask is a simple act of love.
Mm-hmm.
You're not wearing a mask for yourself. See, people had this misnomer where, oh, I already had the virus. No, but you could still carry it and give it to someone else who's immune compromised. So wearing a mask, when people see me wear my mask, which is right here, when people see me wear my mask, you know, I'm actually doing it for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the person that I'm talking to. In case I'm carrying something, I don't know if this person is compromised, immune compromised, especially with all the people that I'm meeting on the campaign trail. Older people are more susceptible to getting the virus. So now that people are interacting, I still want to protect them. So that's how I use my faith. Was tested in my faith. My wife is in healthcare, so we took a lot of my family took my wife's guidance on how we should behave and conduct ourselves regarding masks. This was not a political. You're a Democrat if you wear a mask, and you're a Republican if you don't. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a simple act of love, and that's where I urge people to listen to what Pope Francis said about it. What all religions, can take a good word of advice from the Pope. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit.
What's your take on? Do you think that the county did a pretty good job? When it came to, vaccinations, getting the word out, the reporting the numbers as they were. I mean, the numbers
Mhm.
kind of varied, from day to day at times, and thank God it looks like we're past all of that. But is there anything you think that we could have done better as a county during that crisis, if anything?
Well, first of all, this was something that again we're all dealing with. So not we did. I believe the commission did the best they could with what they had at the time.
Yeah,
Could we have done better? Absolutely.
yeah,
Could I do better as a person in my daily life? Absolutely. Can I do better in my company? Can every department and every company and every city government do better just generally? There's always room for improvement.
yeah.
So that's my take on the pandemic. What could we have done better? Well, what do we do? I do believe that there was a sense of fear that all company employees, private, public, they feared driving on the streets during this uh,
Pandemic.
curfew.
Yeah,
And you shouldn't be driving, get caught between. Well, people had to go to work. Some people work night shifts, so that wasn't really well thought out. Um, when and I actually wrote, and I got engaged, and I wrote letters to Governor Abbott. I went through some state reps and senators to get I went through my board of professional engineers to advocate my executive director to follow New York and Alabama and other professional societies that were actually providing advice to the governor to say, call us essential because we need to work, right? So we were self-deeming ourselves and writing letters for our employees, self-deeming ourselves essential. And so there was really a lot of lack of guidance and leadership that I saw. Um, I wish that we could have taken the lead and actually met with, you mentioned faith, with all of our faith leaders, with the
mm-hmm.
bishop, with all of our churches. There's hundreds of churches out there with leaders and their own flocks. We needed to let them be a part and have a seat at the table because they are the ones that have the big congregations and can help send the right message when we do it collectively. So I think we need to have this, again, communication with leaders across agencies and religious life so that we can have a uniform message when it comes to a pandemic. Because like you said, it could happen again. We could have another wave. We could have another variant. So we need to engage all of our leaders, civic leaders and religious leaders in times like this to make sure that we have a uniform message. We're not going to agree on everything,
Right.
but when you have a seat at the table and you can actually advocate for your congregation, for your company, and you're actually listened to and heard, and there's a good discussion, and then county commissioners courts takes all of that into consideration and then listens to everything and makes the best decision, then you can't be blamed for not actually trying to take everyone into consideration.
Right. Right. Well, when is the actual? You're in a runoff election, correct?
Yes, I'm in a runoff election, and the early voting for that is May 16th through May 20th. So it's very
Okay.
confusing. Early voting for the
Now,
May 7th election is happening
what is it
now,
again?
but
May 16th
through the 20th,
through the 20th. Okay. And the
and
actual election,
May 24th.
May 24th. Okay. All right.
So,
Yeah. So, just so that everybody's aware, the folks of Precinct 4 are responsible for electing you, not Precinct 1, 2, 3, is right?
correct.
And I
And
asked this question because
I just remembered when I was naming out the names. I'm not sure if I mentioned Palm Valley. Palm Valley suffered severe flooding as
yeah,
well. So they're right in the heart of Flood Central. And I live right next door to the Palm Valley residents. We share the same major ditches. So I
yeah.
just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I asked the question about who elects who because I made the mistake a few weeks ago where I called a relative of mine and I said, "Did you vote for this?" And he says, "No, it was on the ballot." And then it quickly dawned on me he didn't even live in the precinct that proposition. I can't remember what it was, but some people may be confused, because my show is not specific to precincts. It's pretty much wide open all over the place. So, it just so happens that I've had different candidates from different precincts for their respective elected offices come on, and I think sometimes when they get to the ballot box, they're looking for JV. Where is he? And it's because they're in the wrong precinct. So
It's very confusing. There is a lot of voting going on, and that's one of the reasons why in the Harlingen elections, one of the amendments, and I urge everybody to vote yes to all three amendments. There's an amendment for changing the elections from May to November to avoid all this confusion
right,
and to have more voters turn out. And
right,
historically, Remy Garza has admitted this. The data is there. More people vote in November.
yeah,
So anyone who wants to have an election in May, including for the arena, I consider is a form of voter suppression.
yeah,
Because why don't we wait until November when the majority of people are out there and inspired and are motivated to vote? When we vote in May, it seems like you're trying to hide or slip
yeah,
something through. So the amendments for Harlingen are amending the city charter for the airport board, the
yeah.
process. We vote yes. Changing from May to November, vote yes. And then for term limits,
Okay,
there have been people in office and made it a career and a livelihood. That is not what public service should be.
right,
It should be you go in there, you have an agenda, you work on something, and then you do your problem, you solve your problems best you can do, and there should be an amount of time because then people just get complacent and you don't
yeah.
have any new ideas.
So is that term limits amendment? Is that like a two-term limit, a four-term limit? Do
I
you know?
believe I believe this one specifically is a 4-term limit of 3 years. So essentially 12-year max term limits. I think that's still too much. I think you should be able
Yeah,
to get, 8 years max, but I mean, it's a starting point for addressing term limits. And am I in favor for term limits at county commissioners? Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Alrighty. Well, we've gone about an hour, and is there anything, lastly, you would like to, share with the audience? Any kind of closing statement you'd like to do? I'll give you an opportunity to kind of, have one last say.
Yeah, just that I think I've showed the constituents of Precinct 4 that I will get my hands dirty if I have to clean the ditches myself. I'll get a shovel and go down there and dig them. I would also like to urge the current commissioner, who still has the authority to get stuff done, to now I know he watches my Facebook because he was pulling it up at the debate. So watch my Facebook because I've essentially used my Facebook as a work order system because the ones that go through the office of Precinct 4 go ignored.
Yeah,
There are real easy, low-hanging fruit of just basic cleaning a ditch, basic coordinating with the state, coordinating with the drainage district, that he has this awesome authority that he could go and advocate for. I urge him to not wait for me to do it when I'm elected. That's one thing because the people really need. If once I get elected for, once I win this election, then I still need to go to November and go up against the Republican candidate and win
yeah,
that election. So I won't be taking office until January of
right,
2023. So that's a long ways out for me to actually have any kind of authority. So that's why I urge the current elected to do a little bit more than what they've been doing.
right.
With that being said, I will put my entire strength, all my energy, all my being into bringing public service as a public servant, which should be the main goal of a public servant. Basic public service. Back to the ABCs, back to the basics of serving the people
Yeah,
and serving those in most need who are suffering all the time, who have got ignored.
yeah.
So that's why you should vote for me.
Alrighty. Well, JV, I definitely appreciate you spending some time tonight. You're always welcome back anytime.
Thank
If
you.
you're successful in the 24th, we'll definitely invite you back in.
Thank you so much. I
And
appreciate that.
even if you don't, we'll still invite you back in.
All right. Well,
So I think you're a pretty knowledgeable guy in your area, and we definitely like to have you back as a resource. I actually have another podcast, Brownsville Tech Live, and besides technology, we've also dealt into solar energy and some of those alternative sources of energy. So
that's right.
definitely we wouldn't mind having a talk or two about some of the technologies that we can employ,
I would love to have that conversation.
and with your expertise. But definitely you're welcome at any time. Everybody, once again, tonight we've had Mr. J.V. Garcia. He's running for Cameron Commissioner, Precinct 4. And like you said, the election is on May 24th, and early voting starts on the 16th, I believe. That's what you mentioned.
That's correct.
So get out and do your duty and vote for, your elected officials that are running. So, JV, we thank you for coming on board, and everybody have a good night.